Africa is making strides in its visa openness policies, boding well for cross-border travel, ease of movement and trade in 2024 and beyond. However, calls are mounting for more countries to open their borders and allow visa-free travel to drive tourism and encourage global trade. Countries like Rwanda and Kenya have heeded the call to relax visa rules, but some remain skeptical. Now we have Vusumuzi Sibanda, Chairperson at Africa Diaspora Forum, joining us to discuss how open borders can benefit the continent. Hello, thank you so much for joining me at this time.
And good afternoon and compliments of the new season, and thank you much for our
season. Thank you so much. All right, so what are the main benefits of African countries adopting visa-free movement, and how will this enhance economic integration and cooperation among African countries?
Well, look, apart from the main agenda of the free trade area that is envisaged, in terms of the AU and SADC as well, I think that if you look at tourism and you look at the movement of goods, across, the African continent, all these become, the sectors of the economy that definitely can benefit from this. We have seen this happening. For example, we've just seen the UK, adding 6 more countries and showing that this is going to really benefit, their tourism industry, and the figures that, have been referred to there in terms of the benefit running into billions. So we know that, for example, Africa with these restrictions, we know South Africa lost a lot of money, in the last 2-3 years because of the stringent, visa restrictions, and that a lot of some people from foreign, rather from Western countries or European countries have decided not to come to some of these African countries because of these visa restrictions. But in fact, you will notice that the bulk of these visa restrictions actually affect African countries and they affect the Western countries. So once people in Africa can move across Africa, it means that more in terms of tourism can take place and the exchange of goods, and culture.
All right, so let's away from Africa now. Are there any immediate examples of successful regional integration efforts in other parts of the world that have led to increased trade and economic growth?
Well, of course, yes. I mean, there is a lot. If you look at the Chechen, regime, the countries and the EU in particular, this shows exactly, how this, greatly impacts and assists, them in increasing, their trade and to enhance, business and trade. And for example, we see that Britain, which left the EU, is actually trying to open its own, and relax its own visa regime so that it can allow more people to come, to Britain, because it realizes that, despite having left, the EU, it needs other countries in order for it to do a lot better. So these regimes and these practices are actually taking place in a lot of, the countries, across the globe.
All right, so what or which specific industries or sectors are likely to benefit the most from this visa-free movement in Africa, and why?
Well, look, the most immediate one is tourism, because what it means is basically that, the people of Africa can actually go to, their neighboring countries for purposes of visit and without thinking about these visa restrictions. You will remember that in South Africa, for example, there was the big problem when, children had to carry, unabridged birth certificates and all that, and people had difficulties entering South Africa, despite the fact that a lot of people would have loved to come to South Africa, to places like, Cape Town, the Western Cape, where they go to Table Mountain, or where they can go to the Drakensberg Mountains or Mpumalanga. And we also know that a lot of people would find it a lot easier to move to countries like Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania with the Lake Victoria and so forth, where they would really want to spend so much time. But these have become places that are enjoyed by Westerners or people outside of Africa, because the visa regimes in Africa tend to be very prohibitive. And of course, beyond that, we can also see that, personal trade industries, for example, the import and the export industries would become more, easy, to access. I mean, we know that a lot of people consume from other countries. Many countries in the SADC region, for example, they get their products from South Africa. But for the stringent visa regimes, people end up failing to import, which would obviously grow the exchange of goods and commodities between these countries and the currents.
All right, well, thank you so much, Vusumuzi Sibanda, for joining me at this time to discuss this.
Thank you and good afternoon.